The very first vocational institutions in Finland were established already in the 19th century, so more than 150 years ago. The first ones were in wood industry and business and economics. But the sort of systematic development of vocational education and training really began after the Second World War. And until about 25 years ago, we had three levels of vocational schools and vocational qualifications. We had the school level qualifications, college level qualifications, and higher vocational qualifications. But in mid 1990s, these two higher levels of vocational education merged into one. So we had or they developed the universities of applied sciences or polytechnics, as we also sometimes call them in Finland. Um, Obviously, Finnish vocational education and training has gone through a lot of changes over the years, and some very big reforms took place in 2001 and subsequently, because then they started to incorporate on the job learning periods into the curricula. Earlier, we had one longer practice or internship at the end of the studies, but in early 2000s, the on-the-job learning periods were sort of distributed throughout the curriculum. And each vocational qualification has a minimum of 20 credits of on-the-job learning. So that equals roughly 6 months at the workplace. And the on the job learning is guided and goal oriented studying at the workplace. So, not just an internship, but it actually is a study module with its own learning objectives and expected learning outcomes. Here are some of the objectives or reasons for being for vocational education and training. And I think obviously the important ones are improving the skills of the workforce force and of course responding to the needs of the world of work. But I'd like to point out that also supporting lifelong learning is very important in our vocational education and training. Right now, we have 119 different study programs that lead to 53 different vocational qualifications. But as part of the reform, ongoing reform in vocational education and training, the number of vocational qualifications will be reduced by next year, by 2020, so that we'll have only 43 different qualifications left. And something that is really important in our system, and one of the nicest features in our system of education, is that even with a vocational qualification, you will get the general eligibility for higher education studies. So you can continue your studies either in University of Applied Sciences or traditional university. So this means that the decision that you make when you are about 15 does not necessarily impact the rest of your life and your educational choices for later on. In vocational education and training, we have the following 8 fields: humanities and education, social science, natural sciences, and so on and so on. And the vocational qualifications in these fields vary quite a lot. So, for example, in technology, communication, and transport, you can gain a vocational qualification for truck driver, for example, or logistics um, operator. In tourism, catering, domestic services, you can study to become, a cleaner or a cook or a receptionist at hotel. In natural sciences, natural resources and the environment, you can become a nature tourist guide, for example. Social services, health and sport, um, assistant nurse is a very popular vocational qualification, and so on and so on. In the current system, the extent of a vocational qualification is 120 Finnish credits, so that equals to 3 years of full-time studying. And 90 credits of those 120 credits are vocational subjects, including at least the 20 credits of the practical on-the-job learning. Then we have 20 credits of general course subjects and 10 credits of elective studies. The qualifications consist of units that form that are part of the qualification, and the units are expressed, studied, and assessed together. So you get only one grade for each unit, but this is apparently changing in the current reform. The knowledge, skills, and competence that a student is supposed to gain during the module or unit are described as learning outcomes for this unit. And as I promised, I'm showing you the structure of a vocational qualification. This is the vocational qualification in social and healthcare, 120 Finnish credits. Consisting of 90 credits of vocational modules, 50 credits are compulsory modules that are the same for everyone. Then there are 30 credits of specialization specific modules and 10 of optional vocational modules. So for example, in this vocational qualification in social and healthcare, the people will get the qualification to work as assistant nurses. And in the compulsory modules, they have studies related to the healthcare of children, of elderly people, of patients in hospitals, of patients in psychiatric hospitals, and so on and so on. Then you can specialize in one of these fields, so to say. So you can be an assistant nurse who has specialized in children, for example, or hospital administration. In the core subjects, general subjects, we have basically they are subjects that you have already studied in comprehensive school. And we have the compulsory modules that are the same for everyone, including, for example, languages, mathematics, health education, chemistry, and physics. And then you have 4 credits of optional studies. So, for example, you can study psychology or ICT, or especially, for example, if you plan to have your own company or establish your own company later on, you can study entrepreneurship. And then 10 credits of free choice modules that can be in a vocational field, or then you can, for example, include courses from general upper secondary education in this part of your qualification. As I referred to, the vocational education and training is going through a reform right now, and the reform began in 2018. And in this reform, for example, the funding system for vocational education and training changes quite a lot, so that more emphasis is put on the impact and the performance indicators of vocational education and training. This means in practice that the statistics of number of graduated students, number of students who have gained employment after graduation, and other such indicators are taken into account when deciding funding for the schools and for various fields of vocational education and training. And obviously, quality management and development is needed to reach these objectives. Another key feature in the reform is the individualization of studies, so that the study plans and study paths of the students become more and more personalized, also through recognition of prior learning, so that if you have already studied something or you have acquired a certain skill through even informal way, uh, you can demonstrate that you know this and you don't have to sit the course um, on that subject at the school anymore. Even more emphasis will be placed on the on-the-job learning, so the students will spend even more time in at the workplaces. The guidance and support services will need to be developed as well because of this individualization and personalization of the studies, and the more time spent on the job learning periods. Right now, people are um, renewing the curricula for vocational qualifications. This is something that is an ongoing progress as we speak. And the extent of the new curricula will be 180 study points. So they are changing the old Finnish 120 credits into 180 study points. And the assessment scale will be from 1 to 5, as opposed to 1 to 3 as it used to be. And more emphasis will be placed on the skills demonstrations because the students will spend more time in on-the-job learning periods. One of the big changes is also the application system changes. Right now, we have had one application period in spring and then another in autumn for those places that were left vacant. In future, we are going to have the major application period in spring, but then the applicants can apply throughout the year continuously. So this gives more flexibility for the studies and also for starting your vocational studies.